I love it. Now, time to talk about some of those people, the places and events that have all gone to make up the history of this area in a weekly feature that we call the Pride of Merseyside. We do it around this time of day every Thursday afternoon. And today we're covering all three of those subjects when we say, what have the Normans ever done for us? Well, the person who might be able to answer that question is a lad called Lee Rymel, the man responsible for the website historyofliverpool.com. And he's taken us back to 1066.
1066, of course, is the date everyone knows to do with the Battle of Hastings. And to put that in context, this was a battle for the claimant to the English crown between three different competitors. Now, on our side, you had King Harold Godwinson, and he was fighting off claimant in Norway, from Norway, and then basically moved his army all the way down from Yorkshire down to Hastings. And in doing so, I've got a suspicion that he might have took some Liverpool or Merseyside men with him. And I've got a sort of theory as to why this might be.
So you reckon there could have been Scousers at the Battle of Hastings then?
Well, I do really, yeah, because it's because that due to his army was very much wiped out in this battle between another claimant, and as he moved across the country, they went from village to village, and they took people with them. Now, based on what we know from the Domesday book, there was around about 100, 150 or so farms or houses in this area at that time. And they had a rule that they took one man from every 5 houses. So you've got to therefore do the maths. And there's somewhere maybe between 20, 30, 40 people from this area would have been drafted into that army. All right. Now, these wouldn't have been people like you or I. They wouldn't have had Scouse accents. In fact, they wouldn't have even spoke English. But they would have been from this area. They'd have called themselves Anglo-Saxons from the Kingdom of Northumbria or the Kingdom of Mercia, based on whether or not you were in North or South Liverpool. But I do believe there were people from this area at that battle that we all know so well, you know.
I mean, Liverpool itself is not referenced in the Domesday book. Well, who were the West Derby 100 then?
Well, this was the West Derby 100 was what the area was called. And this refers to the area of Merseyside today. And 100 means basically 100 properties, more or less. I mean, the Domesday Book records 128 farms in the area, but the Domesday Book is not to be trusted 100% due to, like I say, the language issues in collating it, in that the people here would have spoke Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse. They spoke Norman French, and the whole thing was written down in Latin. And also, people were very guarded as to what they wanted to say, because it was ultimately, all about collecting money, But yeah, you're right. West Derby was the main administrative area at the time, which is largely due to its Viking roots. There was a Viking court in the middle of West Derby, which presumably became the court which was there in Elizabethan times, which still stands there today. Next to the Chippy.
There was like a castle there originally, was there?
Well, you're right, yeah. What the Normans did is, to give them some kind of base and administration point, they built what's called a Motte and Bailey castle. Now, this wouldn't have been a castle like we've seen in films with, brickwork or, that type of thing. It was more a fort, really. So this would have been a mound of earth with a timber fort on top of it, with a lower enclosed area where the troops and people and animals and etc. would have been. But it gave them a good opportunity for hunting grounds and things, because Croxteth Park was a huge deer park, and that's where the word West Derby comes from. The word Derby is an amalgamation of der, meaning deer, and by meaning a place. So it was like the place of the deer. And it was deemed relatively important because it was given the West to distinguish it from Derby in the Midlands. So, based on that, you'd think it was of relative importance, even though the population was probably only really about, 500 people, 1,000 people maximum.
So were there any other local destinations as we know them now mentioned around that time?
Well, yeah, because obviously the Domesday book listed almost everything in the area at that time. So lots of places that we know today, the names pretty much stem from that time. So you've got the likes of, Roby and Croxteth and Tarbock, and these are all names that are that were known to people to some degree back then, but they would have been pronounced differently. So a lot of them we wouldn't understand today. But some of the names give us clues as to what was there. So things like, Kirby means like a village with a church. Kirk being church.
That's right, St. Chad's, isn't it?
Yeah, Kirkdale was a place, a road to a church. Dale was a road, and Kirk is a church. So Kirkdale is the road to the church. So lots of elements of the Domesday Book, are still known to us today.
Wow. I mean, it's a fascinating story, this. It really is. And you were talking about this castle in West Derby, but King John built another castle there, didn't he?
Well, that's right. That was built, obviously, what is in today's Castle Street. And basically, the demise of West Derby Castle has a lot to do with the building of King John's Castle, because as soon as the castle in Castle Street got built, which is in the sort of 1230s, then everyone sort of left West Derby and moved into town, and then that's how Liverpool got going as the main area. I mean, if you go back 1,000 years, obviously, there's no such thing as Liverpool. I mean, are you in Hanover Street now? Is that where the Radio Merseyside?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have stepped out of Hanover Street 1,000 years ago, Sean, you'd have stepped into basically a swamp. It would have been marshland and the remnants of the old pool, which, of course, where Liverpool gets its name from. Sure. So town as we know it was that. It was just like swampy marsh with at best a couple of houses. And it was really only when the castle got set up there that it got going as the city we know it today, But West Derby's castle lay round about where Parkside Drive is. For those who know it, in West Derby Village, you've got the Barry's pub, and goes down the side, and you've got Meadow Lane, and down there is a grassed area, and that's where the West Derby Castle lay. It's quite a nice thing in a way to think when you're down there that Norman knights would have marched down that road. They would have marched past the Barry's pub and the Sefton Arms,
What you were saying about the language, which I think is very interesting. What about words that people used then that we would recognise now,
Well, it's very interesting that, because lots of the words that the Normans gave us, there's a certain theme to them. So I'm going to give you some words from Norman times that the Merseyside people wouldn't have known what they were, but they had to soon adopt them. And it's words like court and crime and evidence and judge and jury and most importantly, tax. So you see the theme in these words. They're all about control and power. Yeah, and this is where the kind of this is what the Normans were like. It wouldn't have been that long ago that the people from Liverpool, the Liverpool area, they would have been fighting them in battle, and then suddenly they were their overlords. And I think it might have caused a bit of a stink, And then there's weirder words in the way that perhaps your and I ancestors would have known as you'd have ate a cow and you'd have ate a pig. And you'd have ate a deer. Now, as soon as the Normans come along, suddenly those words start to change, and they call it beef and pork and veal, and those words suddenly adopt a different meaning, because it's like, well, you eat this, but on our plate, when you serve it to us, it has a kind of posher-sounding French name.
It's interesting.
It did change an awful lot in that respect.
Lee, a pleasure talking to you today. Some fascinating stuff there from our locality. And your website is thehistoryofliverpool.com, isn't it?
It is indeed, Sean. Yeah, can I just leave your listeners one question from this era? And I'm wondering if they can find this out or look it up. And I'll maybe you could tell them next week what the answer is. Well, where in Liverpool will you find a building with Norman brickwork from 1,000 years ago?
What a nice lad, Lee. They're full of interesting stuff as well, So the question again, where in Liverpool would you find Norman brickwork That's not a fella's name. Norman brickwork from 1,000 years ago. So where in Liverpool would you find Norman brickwork from 1,000 years ago? 0800 731 9333 if you think you know. We'll take some calls on that. I'll give you the answer a bit later on. But if you want to find out any more, go to Lee's website. It's the History of Liverpool, all one word, historyofliverpool.com. And some fascinating stuff. Thanks to Lee for taking part today in the Pride of Merseyside. You're with Sean Styles. It's Thursday afternoon on BBC Radio Merseyside. I was talking just